He walked into my office like a man who believed the building already belonged to him. No knock. No pause. No hesitation. Just a polished smile, a sharp suit, and a sentence delivered like a blade. Rachel Whitman, you're terminated effective immediately. No handshake. No explanation. No courtesy. Just execution. I smiled, calmly placed my access badge on the desk, and said the one sentence that would freeze the executive floor exactly 2 hours later. Great. Then you should probably start preparing for the board meeting. My name is Rachel Whitman, and until 30 seconds ago, I was the Chief Operating Officer of Meridian Crest Technologies. I had been sitting in that corner office on the 41st floor for 7 years. Long enough to know the building's moods better than my own. Long enough to know which elevator stalled in winter, which server rack hummed too loud at night, and exactly how fragile the illusion of power really was. The man standing in my doorway had been CEO for 4 hours. He was about to make the most expensive mistake of his life. His name was Andrew Calloway. A shiny import from Silicon Valley. Hired for disruption, decisiveness, and bold leadership. That usually meant someone who mistook speed for intelligence and volume for authority. Andrew didn't sit down. He didn't ask how my morning was. He stood over my desk like a king rehearsing his coronation. We're restructuring, he said, the word rolling off his tongue as if he enjoyed it. We're moving in a leaner direction. Security will escort you out. Leave your badge and laptop. He was waiting for something. Panic. Anger. Negotiation. He wanted me to beg. He wanted proof that he was powerful. I gave him none of it. I stood up slowly, smoothed my blazer, reached into my pocket, and placed my badge on the desk. It made a soft click against the wood. Understood, I said. Then I looked him straight in the eyes and added, you might want to review the board agenda. His smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second. What board meeting? He asked. I picked up my bag and walked past him without answering. Security was waiting in the hallway. 2 men I knew well. Marcus had a daughter in college. I'd written her recommendation letter. Evan avoided eye contact like he was ashamed to breathe. It's okay, I said gently. I know you're just doing your job. The walk to the elevator felt longer than it should have. Meridian Crest's executive floor was designed by someone who believed glass walls inspired honesty. What they really inspired was fear. Conversations died as I passed. Monitors dimmed. Phones lowered. I felt the weight of 100 unspoken questions pressing into my back. Was she fired? Did she mess up? Is this what happens now? I didn't look at anyone. I kept my head up and walked like I had somewhere important to be. Because I did. The elevator doors closed. The descent began. My phone vibrated once in my bag. I didn't check it. I didn't need to. That vibration wasn't sympathy or gossip. It was confirmation. The HR system had processed my termination. Andrew thought he'd removed an employee. He didn't understand the architecture of the company he thought he controlled. By firing me, he hadn't just ended a role. He triggered a sequence written years ago, buried deep in Meridian Crest's corporate DNA, and designed for moments exactly like this. Moments when someone confused a title with ownership. I stepped out into the cold Chicago air and crossed the street to a coffee shop called Northline. It had bad espresso and excellent sightlines. I ordered black coffee and took a seat by the window facing the tower. From the outside, Meridian Crest looked calm. Glass and steel. No cracks. No smoke. But systems don't scream when they fail. They whisper. I opened my personal laptop. Not the company-issued one. This machine wasn't connected to Meridian Crest's network. It didn't need to be. I logged into the shareholder governance portal. Not many people knew it existed. Fewer still had the keys. A red alert pulsed onto the screen. Executive officer termination detected. Compliance review initiated. I took a sip of coffee. Bitter. Perfect. Andrew Calloway was probably upstairs congratulating himself. Maybe rehearsing a town hall speech about decisive leadership. He had no idea the system was already questioning his authority. A second alert appeared. Emergency protocol active. Voting rights verification in progress. I checked the clock. 1 hour and 45 minutes until the board meeting. The first notifications were already being pushed. The chairwoman in New York. Legal counsel in Boston. Institutional investors overseas. Meridian Crest wasn't reacting emotionally. It was reacting structurally. Exactly as designed. I leaned back and let my mind drift, back to a time Andrew Calloway had never bothered to learn about. 12 years earlier, Meridian Crest wasn't a respected logistics platform. It was a failing startup bleeding cash out of a rented warehouse. I wasn't COO then. I was a consultant hired to clean up a mess no one else wanted. The founders were brilliant engineers and terrible leaders. When the banks threatened to pull funding, they panicked. I didn't. I negotiated. I didn't take salary. I didn't take bonuses. I took equity. Real equity. Voting equity. Every time I saved the company, my stake grew. Quietly. Legally. By the time Meridian Crest went public, the structure was clear to anyone who bothered to read it. The public owned the value. The board owned oversight. I owned control. Andrew Calloway never read it. Visionaries rarely do. They skim. They assume. They mistake confidence for competence. I watched the dashboard populate as directors logged in one by one. Faces appeared. Names I trusted. People who knew what that red alert meant. My phone rang. It was Daniel Pierce, our CFO. Rachel, he said, breathless. Please tell me this is a glitch. It's not, I replied calmly. He fired me. There was a pause. Then, oh my God. He triggered it. Yes, I said. He did. Daniel exhaled sharply. His authority is already frozen. He can't approve anything. He can't even send an internal memo. I smiled faintly. Good, I said. Then the system is working. Meeting invites started hitting my screen. From Andrew. Urgent. Immediate. Clarification. I declined every one. Silence was more powerful than confrontation. Let him sit with it. Let him wonder. Let him realize something was wrong without me explaining it. That silence was doing the work for me. I watched as a black car pulled up outside the building. The chairwoman had arrived in person. That wasn't a meeting. That was a reckoning. I closed my laptop and stood. It was time. Not to return as an employee. Not as a victim. But as what I had always been. The owner of the fine print. I crossed the street, entered the lobby, and walked towards security. I can't let you in, Marcus said nervously. Andrew's orders. I met his eyes. Andrew Calloway's authority is suspended, I said evenly. I am the majority voting shareholder. The board is waiting for me. Marcus hesitated. Then slowly, he overrode the system. The light turned green. Go ahead, ma'am. As the elevator rose, I felt the last traces of hesitation fall away. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is emotional. This was governance. This was surgery. When the doors opened onto the executive floor, conversation stopped. People stared. 2 hours ago, they watched me escorted out. Now I was walking back in, alone, unafraid, and undeniably in control. I walked past my old office. Past Andrew's. Straight toward the boardroom. The doors were closed. Inside, voices murmured. Waiting. I placed my hand on the wood. Took one breath. And pushed. And that was when the room went silent. The boardroom went silent the moment I stepped inside. Not the polite silence of a meeting about to begin, but the heavy kind, the kind that presses against your ears and tells you something irreversible is about to happen. A long walnut table stretched across the room, polished to the point of arrogance. Screens glowed on the far wall with remote directors logging in one by one. At the head of the table sat Andrew Calloway. 2 hours earlier, he had fired me without blinking. Now he looked like a man who had just realized the ground beneath his feet wasn't solid. His tie was loose. His jacket was off. His hands were clenched together as if he were holding on to something invisible. He opened his mouth. I didn't let him speak. I walked past the chair to his right, the one meant for me, and continued to the opposite end of the table. The seat reserved for the largest voting shareholder. I pulled it out and sat down. The shift in the room was immediate. Power doesn't announce itself. It moves. Let the record show, the chairwoman said from the screen, her voice cool and controlled, that this emergency session of the Meridian Crest Board of Directors is now in order. Andrew straightened. This is a misunderstanding, he said quickly. I made a personnel decision as CEO. I folded my hands on the table and looked at him. You didn't make a personnel decision, I said calmly. You triggered governance. The general counsel cleared her throat and began reading from the charter. Dates. Clauses. Language Andrew had never bothered to read. The termination of a protected officer holding more than 5% of voting equity requires a supermajority board vote prior to execution, she said. Because no such vote occurred, the action is void, and the CEO's executive authority is suspended pending review. Andrew stood up. That's insane, he snapped. How can I lead if I can't make decisions? The chairwoman didn't look impressed. You can't lead, she said, if you don't understand who you work for. The screen changed. The capitalization table filled the wall. Names. Entities. Percentages. 2 columns mattered. Economic interest and voting power. Andrew leaned forward, squinting, until he saw it. At the top. The Whitman Trust. Class B voting shares. Voting power, 68%. He stared. Then he looked at me. You own the vote, he whispered. Yes, I said. I do. The room felt colder. This wasn't disclosed, he said weakly. The general counsel didn't miss a beat. It was disclosed in your employment agreement, she replied. You signed it. She pulled up the metadata. You spent 2 minutes on a 40-page document. Silence. Andrew sat back down, the fight draining out of him. He looked small now. Not defeated yet. But close. That was when another voice tried to enter the room. If I may, said Thomas Keller, the VP of Strategy, Andrew's shadow since day one. He smiled like this was still salvageable. The CEO was acting on strategic guidance. We identified legacy leadership as a blockage to a potential liquidity event. The chairwoman cut him off. You are not recognized to speak. I turned my gaze to him. Liquidity event, I repeated. That's an interesting phrase. I nodded to the general counsel. Pull up the briefing document Andrew received last night. The screen changed again. Slides appeared. Headcount reductions. Divestitures. And there it was. Eliminate COO role. My name circled in red. Further down. Prepare company for acquisition. Andrew's head snapped toward Thomas. You said the board was aligned, Andrew said. Thomas didn't answer. He couldn't. The CFO spoke next, his voice steady. A data room was opened 48 hours ago, he said. External access was granted. The domain belongs to Blackwood Capital. The room erupted. You gave them our data, the chairwoman demanded. Thomas stood up, panicking now. This is standard market testing, he said. If they see weakness, they'll move anyway. I stood. Slowly. Deliberately. This wasn't strategy, I said. This was sabotage. You weren't building value. You were bleeding it out so your friends could buy the corpse. Thomas looked like he might run. Security stepped closer. The general counsel didn't mince words. Unauthorized disclosure of proprietary information constitutes cause for termination and referral. Thomas sat down. The board fractured for a moment. Someone mentioned optics. Stock price. Stability. The chairwoman looked at me. If we keep Andrew on probation, she asked, can you work with him? Andrew looked at me like a drowning man looks at a rope. I didn't hesitate. I can, I said. Hope flickered across his face. Then I finished. But the company can't survive the way he makes decisions. The CFO nodded. He bypassed safeguards for speed, he said. That's unacceptable risk. The chairwoman exhaled once. Call the vote, she said. Names were read. Votes cast. Yes, after yes, after yes. When it came to me, I didn't look away. Yes, I said. The chairwoman closed it. The motion carries unanimously. Andrew Calloway is terminated for cause, effective immediately. Andrew didn't argue. He simply removed his badge and phone and placed them on the table. 2 hours ago, he had asked for mine. Security escorted him out. The same guards who had walked me out earlier. The symmetry was almost poetic. The room settled. Interim CEO, the chairwoman said, turning back to business. We propose Rachel Whitman. I shook my head. No, I said. I don't want the crown. I want the engine room. I nodded to the CFO. He should lead. I'll keep operations steady. The vote was swift. Approved. The alerts on the governance screen cleared. Red turned to green. System secure. I walked back to my office alone. My badge was still on the desk where I'd left it. I clipped it back on. The lake outside was calm again. I sat down, pulled a stack of contracts toward me, and uncapped my pen. The crisis was over. The work remained. And that's the lesson here. Power doesn't come from shouting. It comes from preparation. It comes from reading what others skim. From building structures that protect what matters when egos fail. If you enjoyed this story of corporate justice, drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Hit like if you believe leadership should be earned, not assumed. And subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us why the fine print matters. I'll see you in the next boardroom.